Hi. What then is the foundation or cornerstone doctrine of the Watchtower? Ray goes on, what especially distinguishes their teachings from any other denomination is the keystone doctrine centered on 1914 as the date when Christ's active rulership began, his commencing judgment then, and above all, his selecting the Watchtower organization as his official channel, his assigning full control of all his earthly interests to a faithful and discreet slave class, and factually giving ultimate authority to its ruling body. Any abandoning of that keystone teaching would affect the whole doctrinal structure and is extremely unlikely. It would be very difficult to explain. The past few years have seen just the opposite, a determined effort through the columns of the Watchtower and other publications to shore up their defense of the interpretations surrounding that date or resulting from it, to sustain faith in the claims based on it. Most important among those claims is that related to organizational authority. And here again, there is presently a very intensive campaign to solidify support of and loyalty to that authority structure. True, each year that passes places more of a strain on that teaching and those claims. 1984 marks 70 years since 1914. Eventually, the teaching about the generation living in 1914 may become just too difficult to sustain with any credibility. But there are various adjustments that might be advanced, some of these having been considered in Chapter 9. And those Chapter 9 suggestions by members of the governing body are analyzed in our videos back at the beginning of this series. And the claims could still be retained, that is the claim on 1914, could still be retained in an altered form. Organizationally, moves are being made to go back to more centralized authority. Additional tacking, he adds. In the spring of 1983, a new organization manual restored the position of a more or less permanent presiding overseer as chairman in the bodies of elders. Before that, they'd moved to a rotating presiding overseer. In the early 70s, that switch had been made after they had spent decades with just a single overseer or elder in the congregations. Other centralizing features designed to give greater control on down the line of organizational supervision. Whether this will lead to a re-centralization of authority on the governing body itself with a permanent chairman or overall coordinator remains to be seen. It seems rather unlikely that the present president of the society would be so selected, since he has no particular propensity toward administrative work. He's talking, of course, of his uncle Fred Franz, who was still alive in his 80s at this point. His logical successor would be Milton Henschel, and such a restructuring within the body, with him filling the new position, would seem considerably more likely. And here again, Ray Franz is prescient, because Milton Henschel did indeed succeed Fred Franz as president. Whatever the changes that come, they will most certainly be heralded as the product of divine direction, and the past doctrines or arrangements that may be discarded will be depicted as God's will for that time. Perhaps some kind of maneuvering by the heavenly captain, capital C captain, Christ Jesus, in working toward an end that was ultimately beneficial. As in the past 100 years of the organization's history, there's little reason to believe that the changes will be acknowledged for what they are, generally the result of failing to hold to the scriptures in the first place, and in most cases, changes made under the pressure of circumstances, designed to ward off foreseen dilemmas because of a position that has become untenable. That is not at all the same as corrections that are made by persons who search the scriptures and, as a result of what they discover there, freely admit that they have been in error and wish to rectify their mistakes. In all of this, the basic premise will be persistently upheld, the concept that dominates the thinking, the writing, and the action. It is that premise that God must deal with humans through an organization and that his King, Jesus Christ, has chosen the Watchtower organization for this role. This view hinders many discerning persons from seeing where the true problem lies. As the saying is, they cannot see the forest for the trees. They can see the individual inconsistencies and injustices, the falsity of many teachings, the devious nature of many of the arguments, the unchristian spirit of many of the approaches. But they cannot see what this all adds up to, what the sum total is. They see the parts but not the whole. Some of these persons are in positions of major responsibility. They cling to the hope, even as I clung to the hope, that the future will see great improvements because their thinking is molded to the organizational premise. They feel that God must do something to straighten matters out because that premise or concept must be proved true. God must uphold and vindicate it. Yet that premise lies at the root of the very wrongs they personally lament. It is a concept that did not originate with God. There is no reason to believe that he will feel compelled to support it. Next segment, the peace of God which can come with freedom.